The dying sun cast long shadows across the lonely ranch as Caleb Vance stood on his weathered porch, his hollow eyes reflecting the emptiness that had consumed his life since Sarah's passing. The harsh Montana winter of 1879 had been unforgiving, and now spring brought little relief to the struggling cattle rancher and his two young sons who hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. Caleb's calloused hands gripped the porch railing as he watched 5-year-old Thomas and 7-year-old Samuel playing half-heartedly in the yard, their once exuberant energy diminished by hunger. The cattle disease that had swept through White Pine had decimated his herd, leaving him with barely enough to keep the ranch afloat. Pride had kept him from seeking help, but pride wouldn't fill his sons' empty bellies. "Pa, when's dinner?" Samuel called out, his thin face a painful reminder of Caleb's failures. "Soon, son," he lied, knowing the pantry held nothing but a handful of dried beans and some stale cornmeal. As twilight crept across the horizon, turning the sky into a palette of purples and pinks, Caleb noticed a figure approaching along the winding dirt road. The silhouette of a woman carrying what appeared to be a large pot emerged from the gathering dusk. He squinted, not recognizing the visitor at first, but as she drew closer, he could make out her features in the fading light. Hannah Elliott walked with determination, her black widow's dress billowing slightly in the evening breeze. Her husband, William, had been taken by the same fever that claimed Sarah just months ago, leaving her alone with her grief and a small homestead on the outskirts of White Pine. Caleb had seen her occasionally in town, had nodded politely, but they had rarely exchanged words beyond brief pleasantries. "Evening, Mr. Vance," she called as she approached, her voice steady despite the weight she carried. "I've brought some supper for you and the boys." The rich aroma of beef and vegetable soup wafted toward him, and Caleb felt his stomach clench with hunger and shame. His sons, catching the scent, abandoned their play and raced toward the gate. "Mrs. Elliott," Caleb acknowledged, removing his hat as he descended the porch steps. "This is unexpected." Hannah's eyes, the color of fresh honey, met his without pity but with a quiet understanding that disarmed him. "Neighbors help neighbors, Mr. Vance. That's how we survive out here." She set the pot down carefully, straightening to reveal a face that bore the marks of hardship, yet maintained a gentle beauty that caught Caleb off guard. At 32, Hannah was younger than her premature gray streak suggested, a testament to the difficulties life had dealt her. "Pa, is that food?" Thomas asked, wide-eyed and hopeful, tugging at Caleb's worn trousers. Caleb swallowed his pride. "Yes, son. Mrs. Elliott has kindly brought us supper." "It's still hot," Hannah said, reaching into her basket to produce a loaf of freshly baked bread. "And there's enough for tomorrow as well." The boys looked to their father for permission, which he gave with a slight nod, unable to deny them this kindness despite his wounded pride. "Thank you, madam," Samuel exclaimed, already inching toward the pot with undisguised eagerness. "Let's get this inside," Caleb said, lifting the pot with hands that betrayed a slight tremble. "Will you join us, Mrs. Elliott?" Hannah hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'd be obliged, Mr. Vance." Inside the modest cabin, Caleb lit the oil lamps, revealing a space that showed signs of neglect. Dishes were piled in the dry sink, clothing waited to be mended, and a fine layer of dust covered the few pieces of furniture. Hannah's eyes took in the scene without judgment, recognizing the overwhelming challenge a man faced raising two young boys alone. As the boys washed their hands at Hannah's gentle insistence, Caleb cleared the table, ashamed of the disorder. "I apologize for the state of things," he muttered, stacking papers and moving them aside. "No need," Hannah replied softly. I understand more than most." The boys attacked their soup with fervor, slurping noisily until Hannah gently reminded them of their manners. Caleb ate more slowly, savoring each spoonful, watching this stranger who had appeared like an angel at his doorstep. "This is mighty fine soup, Mrs. Elliott," he said, breaking the silence. "The best," Thomas agreed enthusiastically, his face already showing more color. Hannah smiled, a genuine expression that softened her features. "It's my mother's recipe, simple but filling." As they ate, Hannah drew the boys into conversation, asking about their schooling and interests with such natural ease that Caleb found himself wondering how long it had been since genuine laughter had filled the cabin. The boys responded to her warmth like flowers turning toward the sun, and Caleb felt something within his chest loosen slightly. When the meal was finished and the boys reluctantly allowed themselves to be put to bed, Caleb returned to find Hannah washing the dishes, her sleeves rolled up and her hands submerged in the basin of water he'd drawn from the well. "You don't need to do that," he protested. Hannah glanced over her shoulder. "It's no trouble. Besides, it gives us a chance to talk." Caleb took up a towel and began drying the clean dishes. "Your boys need proper meals, Mr. Vance, regular ones." Caleb's jaw tightened. "I'm well aware of my failings, Mrs. Elliott." Hannah turned to face him fully, her hands dripping water onto the floor. "That's not what I meant. I'm offering to help." "I can't accept charity," Caleb said stiffly. "It's not charity. It's an arrangement." Hannah dried her hands on her apron. "I have vegetables growing in my garden, chickens laying more eggs than I can use, and time on my hands. You have 2 growing boys who need looking after. What are you proposing? I'll come by each afternoon. Cook, clean, help the boys with their schoolwork. In exchange, you can help me with the heavier work on my homestead. The roof leaks, and the barn door won't close properly." Caleb studied her face in the lamplight, looking for signs of pity or condescension but finding only practical determination. "Why would you do this?" Hannah's expression softened. "Because I know what it is to be alone and overwhelmed. Because your boys remind me that life goes on, even when we think it can't. And because idle hands lead to idle thoughts, and I've had quite enough of those." For a long moment, Caleb said nothing, weighing his pride against his son's needs. Finally, he nodded, extending his hand formally. "You have yourself an arrangement, Mrs. Elliott." Hannah's hand was warm and work roughened against his as they sealed their agreement. Neither could have foreseen how this simple transaction of soup and strength would transform their broken lives in the months to come. True to her word, Hannah arrived the next day just as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. This time, she brought a stew of rabbit and wild onions, along with fresh biscuits that filled the cabin with a mouth-watering aroma. The boys greeted her with enthusiasm, already considering her a welcome addition to their daily lives. "Mrs. Elliott, I caught a frog today," Thomas announced proudly as she set about preparing the table. "Did you now? And what did you do with this frog?" Hannah asked, humoring him with genuine interest. "I named him Hopper and put him in a bucket, but Pa said he'd be happier back in the creek," Thomas explained with a slight pout. "Your father is right," Hannah said, giving Caleb an approving glance as he entered the cabin after finishing his evening chores. "Frogs need water and freedom to catch flies." Samuel, the more serious of the 2 brothers, watched Hannah with thoughtful eyes. "My ma used to make biscuits like that," he observed quietly. A brief silence fell, and Caleb tensed, waiting for the familiar wave of grief that accompanied any mention of Sarah. But Hannah handled the moment with grace. "Did she now? I bet she was a fine baker." "Perhaps you could tell me what else she used to make that you boys enjoyed," Hannah suggested, keeping her tone light but respectful. As the boys eagerly shared memories of their mother's cooking, Caleb noticed how Hannah listened with genuine interest, asking questions that allowed them to speak of Sarah without pain overshadowing the fond memories. It was a gift he hadn't been able to give them, still too raw with his own grief to help them navigate theirs. After dinner, while the boys practiced their letters under Hannah's guidance, Caleb approached her about fulfilling his end of their bargain. "I'll come by your place tomorrow after I tend to the morning chores," he offered. "See about that roof and barn door." Hannah nodded. "I appreciate that, Mr. Vance. I've been making do, but some tasks are beyond my capabilities." "Caleb," he said suddenly, "if we're to be working together, you might as well use my given name." A slight smile touched her lips. "Caleb, then, and I'm Hannah." The following day, Caleb rode the short distance to Hannah's homestead, a modest but well-kept property with a small orchard, vegetable garden, and chicken coop. The main house was simple but solid, though as Hannah had mentioned, the roof showed signs of weather damage. Working methodically, Caleb replaced the damaged shingles, repaired the barn door, and reinforced the chicken coop against predators. Hannah provided him with cool water and a midday meal, watching him work with appreciation for his craftsmanship. "You've done this kind of work before," she observed as he completed the repairs with skilled efficiency. Caleb wiped sweat from his brow. "I built our cabin from the ground up when Sarah and I first settled here. Had to learn fast or freeze that first winter." "You've created a good home," Hannah said. "It just needs a woman's touch again." Caleb stiffened slightly at her words, and Hannah immediately recognized her misstep. "I know what you meant," Caleb interrupted, his tone softening as he saw her discomfort. "And you're right. The boys deserve better than what I've been providing." Hannah reached out impulsively, touching his arm. "You've kept them safe and loved. That's what matters most." Her touch, brief though it was, left a warmth that lingered on Caleb's skin long after she'd withdrawn her hand. It had been so long since anyone had offered him comfort that he hardly knew how to respond, so he simply nodded and returned to his work. As spring blossomed into summer, their arrangement evolved into a comfortable routine. Hannah arrived each afternoon, bringing food and order to the Vance household. The cabin transformed under her care curtains appeared at the windows. Wildflowers in jars brightened the table, and the pervasive scent of soap replaced the musty odor of neglect. More significant were the changes in the family itself. The boys gained weight, their hollowed cheeks filling out as they thrived under Hannah's nurturing. Samuel began to excel at his studies with her patient tutoring, while Thomas followed her around the garden she'd started behind the cabin, learning to tend the young plants with surprising gentleness for a 5-year-old. Caleb, too, was changing. The hard lines of exhaustion that had marked his face began to soften. He spoke more, even laughed occasionally at Hannah's dry observations or the boys' antics. On Sundays, he took to accompanying Hannah and the boys to the small church in White Pine, standing tall in his freshly pressed shirt, ignoring the curious glances and whispered speculations of the townspeople. It was after one such Sunday service in late June that Caleb first noticed the way townspeople regarded Hannah. As they walked from the church, he overheard Mrs. Peterson, the storekeeper's wife, speaking to another woman. "Barely waited for William to be cold in his grave, Mrs." Peterson murmured with disapproval, moving in on poor Caleb Vance when he's still grieving his Sarah. Caleb's jaw clenched, but before he could respond, Reverend Miller approached with a warm smile. "It does my heart good to see those boys looking so well, Caleb," the Reverend said. "And Hannah, your kindness has been a blessing to this family." Hannah's cheeks colored slightly. "It's a mutually beneficial arrangement, Reverend. Nothing more." But as they walked home, the boys running ahead on the dusty road, Caleb couldn't help wondering if that was entirely true. Somewhere along the way, Hannah had become essential to their lives in ways that transcended their original agreement. Her presence filled a void he hadn't acknowledged, bringing light back into a world that had seemed perpetually gray since Sarah's death. That evening, after the boys were asleep, Caleb found Hannah on the porch, gazing at the star-filled sky. He joined her, offering a cup of coffee which she accepted with a grateful smile. "People are talking," he said without preamble. Hannah sighed. "People always talk. It's what they do in small towns. Does it bother you? What they're saying?" She considered his question before answering. "I didn't come here for anyone's approval, Caleb. I came because two little boys were hungry and a man looked like he might collapse under the weight he was carrying alone." Caleb studied her profile in the moonlight, struck by the quiet strength she embodied. "And now," Hannah turned to meet his gaze, "now I come because those boys have worked their way into my heart, because this place feels more like home than my own cabin sometimes." She paused, her voice softening. "And because I've come to care for their father as well." The admission hung between them, fragile as spider silk, but just as strong in its connections. Caleb felt something shift within him, a door opening that he'd thought permanently sealed. "Hannah, he began, but found himself at a loss for words. She saved him from his awkwardness with a gentle smile. "It's all right, Caleb. I'm not asking for anything. I understand that Sarah still holds your heart." "She always will," Caleb acknowledged. "But perhaps a heart can expand to hold more than one love." The hope that flickered in Hannah's eyes gave him courage to continue. "I don't know if I'm ready. The boys need stability, not confusion." "I'm not going anywhere," Hannah assured him. "We have time." Their conversation was interrupted by a cry from inside the house, Thomas calling out from a nightmare. Hannah rose immediately, moving with the instinct of a mother to comfort him. Caleb watched her go, feeling a profound gratitude mingled with something deeper that he wasn't yet ready to name. July brought scorching heat and the back-breaking work of haying. Caleb hired 2 local boys to help, but still returned each evening exhausted, his shirt soaked with sweat, his muscles aching from the relentless labor. Hannah took to bringing dinner earlier, making sure he ate properly and often preparing a cool bath for him after the boys were settled. It was during one such evening, as Hannah poured heated water into the metal tub behind a privacy screen in the corner of the cabin, that disaster struck. A cry from outside sent Caleb rushing to the door to find Samuel standing by the barn, pointing frantically at smoke rising from the dry hayfield. "Fire!" Samuel shouted, his face pale with fear. Caleb's heart dropped as he saw flames already spreading rapidly through the drought-dried grass, whipped by the evening breeze directly toward the barn and house. Without hesitation, he sprinted toward the well. "Hannah, get the boys away from the house. Head toward the creek." Hannah appeared instantly, gathering Thomas into her arms and grabbing Samuel's hand. "What about you? I'll try to stop it reaching the buildings." "Go." The next hours passed in a blur of desperate activity. Caleb fought the flames with wet blankets and buckets of water, soon joined by neighbors who had seen the smoke from the road. Men formed a bucket brigade from the well, while women and children dug fire breaks to contain the spreading inferno. By midnight, the fire was finally extinguished, leaving a charred swath of blackened earth where the hayfield had stood. The barn had been saved, though its western wall was scorched, but the real miracle was that the house remained untouched, protected by the combined efforts of the community. Exhausted, smoke-stained, and singed in places, Caleb finally made his way to the creek where Hannah had taken the boys. He found them huddled together on the bank, the boys asleep against Hannah's sides while she kept vigilant watch. "It's over," he told her wearily. "The hay's gone, but we saved the buildings." Hannah's relief was palpable as she gently extricated herself from the sleeping boys. Before Caleb knew what was happening, she had thrown her arms around him, holding him tightly. "I was so afraid for you," she whispered against his soot-stained shirt. Caleb's arms encircled her automatically, drawing comfort from her warmth and solidity. "I couldn't lose the ranch. It's all I have to give my sons." Hannah drew back slightly, looking up at him with intensity. "The ranch can be rebuilt, Caleb. You cannot. Don't ever frighten me like that again." The naked emotion in her voice stripped away his remaining defenses. In the moonlight beside the gurgling creek, with his sleeping sons nearby and the smell of smoke still clinging to his clothes, Caleb Vance kissed Hannah Elliott for the first time. It was a gentle kiss, tentative and questioning, but Hannah responded with a certainty that answered all his unspoken doubts. When they finally parted, Caleb rested his forehead against hers, overwhelmed by the feelings coursing through him: guilt, hope, fear, and a joy he'd thought never to experience again. "I'm sorry," he said hoarsely. "I shouldn't have." "Don't you dare apologize," Hannah interrupted, her hands still resting on his shoulders. "Not for something we both wanted." A small sound made them turn to see Samuel watching them with wide eyes, fully awake now. "Samuel," Caleb began, uncertain how to explain. But the boy surprised him. "Are you going to marry Mrs. Elliott, Pa? Because Tommy and I think you should." Hannah's startled laugh broke the tension, and Caleb found himself chuckling despite his exhaustion. "Is that so?" he asked his son. "And when did you and your brother decide this?" Samuel shrugged with the straightforward logic of a 7-year-old. "She makes you smile again, and she makes the best biscuits." Caleb glanced at Hannah, whose eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Those are compelling arguments, son, but these things take time." "Why?" Samuel persisted. "You like her, she likes you, and we like her too." Hannah knelt down to Samuel's level. "Your pa's right, Samuel. Some decisions shouldn't be rushed, especially important ones like this. But I promise I'll keep making biscuits for all of you, no matter what." This seemed to satisfy Samuel, who nodded solemnly before curling back up beside his still sleeping brother. Caleb and Hannah exchanged a look of shared amusement and understanding before carefully lifting the boys to carry them home. The fire, while devastating to Caleb's hay crop, brought unexpected blessings. Neighbors who had helped fight the blaze continued to show support in the following days. Farmer Jenkins brought over a wagon of hay to see Caleb's cattle through until new grass could grow. The Wilsons contributed seeds for replanting. Even taciturn old Judge Parker stopped by with 2 young apple trees to replace ones damaged by the heat. "Never seen such an outpouring," Caleb remarked to Hannah as they planted the saplings. "Some of these folks hardly spoke to me before." Hannah smiled, tamping soil around the delicate trunk. "Sometimes it takes a crisis to remind people of their better natures, and," she added with a sideways glance, "it probably helps that they've seen you in church regularly these past months." "That was your doing," Caleb acknowledged. "Dragging us back to civilization. I merely suggested. You chose to come." Hannah straightened, brushing dirt from her hands. "This town respects a man who takes care of his family, Caleb. They've watched you struggle alone, too proud to ask for help. Seeing you accept it now isn't weakness in their eyes, it's wisdom." As July melted into August, the easy companionship between Caleb and Hannah deepened. They no longer needed the pretense of their arrangement. Hannah simply became part of their daily lives, arriving in the morning and often staying through the evening. The boys now turned to her as naturally as they did to their father, seeking her comfort for skinned knees and her praise for new achievements. It was during a rare moment alone, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset while the boys chased fireflies in the yard, that Caleb finally found the courage to speak what had been on his mind. "Samuel wasn't wrong, you know," he said quietly, "about what he said that night by the creek." Hannah's hands stilled in her lap. "Which part?" "All of it." Caleb turned to face her directly. "You do make me smile again, and your biscuits are unmatched in the territory." A soft laugh escaped her. "High praise indeed." "Hannah." Caleb took her hand in his. "I never expected to feel this way again after Sarah died. Didn't think I was capable of it, truth be told. But you walked up that road carrying more than just soup that evening. You brought life back to this place to me." Hannah's fingers tightened around his. "Caleb, you don't have to. I love you," he interrupted, the words finally finding their way past the barriers of guilt and fear. "It's different from what I felt for Sarah, but no less real. And if you could consider making this arrangement of ours permanent, I believe we could build something good together." Tears spilled over Hannah's lashes as she looked at him with wonder. "Are you asking what I think you're asking, Caleb Vance?" He smiled, reaching into his pocket to withdraw a simple gold band. "It was my mother's. Sarah's rings are put away for Samuel to give to his bride someday, but I'd be honored if you'd wear this one as my wife." Hannah stared at the ring, then back at his face. "The boys already gave their enthusiastic approval, as you well know," Caleb said with a chuckle. "Samuel's been pestering me daily since the fire." "And you're certain this isn't gratitude?" Or Caleb silenced her doubts with a kiss, pouring all his certainty and love into the gesture. When they parted, both slightly breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I'm more certain of this than anything since the day I decided to settle in White Pine," he assured her. "I want to build a life with you, Hannah. Watch our family grow, face whatever comes together." Hannah's smile bloomed slowly, like a flower opening to the sun. "Then yes, Caleb Vance, I will marry you." A whoop of delight from nearby revealed that their private moment had acquired an audience. Samuel and Thomas rushed onto the porch, throwing themselves at Hannah with such enthusiasm that she nearly toppled from her chair. "Does this mean you'll be our new ma?" Thomas asked, his small face serious as he peered up at her. Hannah's eyes met Caleb's over the boy's head. "If that's what you'd like to call me, I'd be honored. But your mother will always be your mother, Thomas. I wouldn't try to replace her." Samuel, ever the practical one, had already moved on to logistics. "When's the wedding? Can I be the ring bearer? Will there be cake?" Caleb laughed, ruffling his older son's hair. "Slow down there, son. We haven't figured all that out yet." But Hannah was already considering. "Harvest will be finishing soon. Perhaps early October before the winter weather sets in. Nothing elaborate, just family and friends at the church." Caleb nodded. "Sounds perfect." The news of their engagement spread quickly through White Pine, eliciting varied reactions. Many offered genuine congratulations, having witnessed the positive changes in the Vance family since Hannah's arrival. A few, like Mrs. Peterson, sniffed disapprovingly at the relatively short time since both had lost their spouses. But even these critics couldn't deny that the match seemed beneficial for all concerned. Reverend Miller visited to discuss the ceremony, bringing his wife along with a basket of preserves as an engagement gift. Mrs. Miller, a motherly woman with a practical streak, took Hannah aside while the men discussed wedding details. "You're taking on a ready-made family," she observed. "That's no small challenge." Hannah folded the dish towel she'd been holding. "I love those boys already, and Caleb, well, he's worth whatever challenges come." Mrs. Miller's expression softened. "I can see that you do, and they all clearly adore you." She hesitated before continuing. "But there may be difficult moments ahead. The boys might feel conflicted about their loyalty to their mother's memory. Caleb might struggle with old grief at unexpected times. "I know," Hannah acknowledged. "I still think of William sometimes on his birthday, or when I make the stew he particularly enjoyed. Grief doesn't simply vanish because new love arrives." "You're wise beyond your years, my dear," Mrs. Miller said approvingly. "With that understanding, I believe you'll weather whatever storms come your way." As preparations for the wedding progressed, Hannah began the process of combining households. Her small cabin held furniture and keepsakes that would now find places in the Vance home. Caleb built additional shelves and a larger wardrobe to accommodate her belongings, while the boys eagerly helped decide where her books and china should be displayed. September brought the harvest and its accompanying frenzy of activity. Caleb worked from dawn until well past dusk most days, grateful for the help of neighbors who ensured his reduced crop was safely gathered before the fall rains. Hannah divided her time between preserving the garden's bounty and completing her wedding dress, a simple but elegant creation of ivory muslin with lace she'd carefully salvaged from her mother's gown. The wedding day dawned clear and cool, with just enough crispness in the air to herald autumn's arrival. Hannah dressed in her cabin for the last time, assisted by Mrs. Miller and the storekeeper's daughter, who had become a friend in recent months. "You look radiant, Mrs. Miller declared, adjusting the wreath of white wildflowers that crowned Hannah's upswept hair. Hannah studied her reflection in the small mirror, hardly recognizing the glowing woman who looked back at her. The dark circles that had lingered under her eyes throughout her year of widowhood had faded. Her cheeks held healthy color, and her honey-brown eyes shimmered with happiness. "I never thought I'd have this again," she confessed softly. "After William died, I was certain that part of my life was over." Mrs. Miller squeezed her shoulder gently. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, my dear. Sometimes the darkest valleys lead to the brightest mountains." At the small white church in the center of White Pine, Caleb waited nervously at the altar, his sons standing proudly beside him in their best clothes. Samuel held the ring carefully, periodically checking his pocket to ensure it was still there. Thomas bounced slightly on his toes, unable to contain his excitement. When the church door opened and Hannah appeared, Caleb felt his breath catch. She walked alone down the aisle, her head held high, her eyes fixed on him with such love that it seemed to illuminate the space between them. As she reached his side, he took her hand, marveling at how perfectly it fit within his own. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Miller began, his voice carrying clearly through the packed church. "We are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The ceremony passed in a blur for Caleb, who could focus only on Hannah's face and the magnitude of the commitment they were making. When the time came to speak his vows, his voice rang out strong and sure. "I, Caleb, take thee, Hannah, to be my wedded wife. To have and to hold from this day forward for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." Hannah's voice trembled slightly as she repeated the same words, her eyes never leaving his. When Samuel proudly presented the ring, Caleb slipped it onto Hannah's finger, sealing their union with this tangible symbol of his promise. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder," Reverend Miller proclaimed. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Caleb's kiss was gentle but firm, a promise of the life they would build together. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors, the church erupted in applause and cheers, none louder than those from Samuel and Thomas, who immediately rushed forward to embrace both adults in a family hug that brought tears to many eyes. The celebration continued at the ranch, where tables had been set up in the yard under strings of lanterns. Hannah's friends from church had prepared a feast, and Farmer Jenkins provided his famous apple cider, both the sweet version for the children and a harder variety for the adults. As twilight descended, fiddles and a banjo struck up lively tunes, and the yard became an impromptu dance floor. Caleb, who hadn't danced since before Sarah's illness, found himself being pulled into a reel by his laughing bride. As they moved through the steps, surrounded by the community that had supported them through hardship, he felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. "Happy, Mrs. Vance?" he asked during a brief pause in the music. Hannah's smile was radiant. "Happier than I ever imagined possible." Later, after the guests had departed and the boys were finally asleep, exhausted from excitement and dancing, Caleb and Hannah stood alone on the porch of what was now truly their home. "It seems impossible that just 6 months ago you walked up that road carrying soup," Caleb mused, his arm around his wife's waist. Hannah leaned against him, content. "The Lord puts us where we need to be, I suppose. I only intended to help a neighbor in need." "And instead you saved us all," Caleb said softly, turning her to face him. "You brought life back to this place, Hannah, to me, to the boys." "We saved each other," Hannah corrected gently. "I was just as lost, just as alone." As autumn deepened into winter, the newlyweds settled into a rhythm of shared life. Hannah's natural organizational skills transformed the household management, while Caleb found his work lighter with a partner to share both burdens and joys. The boys thrived under the combined care of their father and new mother, their nightmares gradually subsiding as security replaced uncertainty in their young lives. Christmas that year was a celebration unlike any the Vance ranch had seen since Sarah's passing. Hannah decorated the cabin with pine boughs and red ribbons, filled the air with the scents of gingerbread and roasting turkey, and carefully crafted handmade gifts for each family member. Caleb surprised her with a rocking chair he'd secretly built in the barn during the long evenings, while the boys presented clumsily whittled wooden animals they'd created under their father's guidance. As they sat before the fire that Christmas night, the boys asleep amid their new treasures, Caleb noticed a pensive expression on Hannah's face. "What's on your mind, wife?" he asked gently. Hannah smiled at the term he still used with evident pleasure. "I was just thinking about next Christmas." "And what about it has you looking so thoughtful?" Hannah took his hand, guiding it to rest against her still flat stomach. "I was thinking that our family might be a bit larger by then." Caleb stared at her for a long moment as understanding dawned. "Hannah, are you saying?" Her smile widened. "Dr. Phillips confirmed it yesterday. We're expecting a baby in early summer." Joy flooded through Caleb with such force that he could barely speak. Gathering Hannah into his arms, he held her close, his face buried in her hair as he absorbed the magnitude of this blessing. "The boys," he finally managed. "I thought we might tell them together as their Christmas gift," Hannah suggested. "Though we should prepare them for the possibility of a sister. Samuel seems quite convinced that only brothers are acceptable additions to the family." Caleb laughed, imagining his pragmatic older son's reaction to a baby sister. "He'll come around once he meets her. Or him." The news of the coming baby brought renewed energy to the household as winter settled over White Pine. Hannah's practical nature prevented excessive worry, but Caleb found himself hovering protectively, especially during the February blizzard that kept them housebound for nearly a week. "I'm pregnant, not made of china," Hannah reminded him with fond exasperation as he insisted on carrying in the firewood despite her protests. "Women have been having babies since Eve, Caleb." "Not my baby," he countered, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "And not my wife." As her body changed with the advancing pregnancy, Hannah maintained her usual activities as much as possible, though she grudgingly accepted help with the more strenuous tasks. The boys watched the process with fascination, particularly Thomas, who took to talking to Hannah's growing belly each evening, telling the baby about his day and the things they would do together once it arrived. Spring brought renewal to the land and anticipation to the Vance household. The garden was planted, the cattle grazed on fresh grass, and Hannah's nesting instinct found expression in a flurry of preparations for the baby. Caleb converted a corner of their bedroom into a nursery space, building a cradle from seasoned pine, and helping Hannah sew tiny garments during the quiet evenings. In early June, as wildflowers carpeted the meadows around the ranch, Hannah went into labor. Caleb sent Samuel galloping to town for the doctor, while Hannah paced the bedroom, breathing through the increasingly powerful contractions. "This one's in quite a hurry," Dr. Phillips observed when he arrived, finding Hannah already in advanced labor. Unlike his brothers who took their sweet time, Hannah corrected between breaths. "I'm certain it's a girl." The labor progressed rapidly, and as twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, just like the evening Hannah had first arrived at the ranch, their daughter entered the world with a robust cry that immediately captured her father's heart. "You were right," Caleb whispered in awe, watching as Dr. Phillips placed the red-faced, squalling infant on Hannah's chest. "A daughter." Hannah's exhausted face glowed with triumph and love as she cradled their child. "Hello, little one, we've been waiting for you." The boys, allowed in after the cleanup was complete, approached the bed with wide-eyed wonder. "She's so tiny," Samuel observed, peering cautiously at his sister, "and kind of red." "All babies look like that at first," Thomas informed him with the authority of his 6 years. "She'll get prettier." Hannah laughed softly. "Would you like to know her name?" Both boys nodded eagerly. "This is Grace Sarah Vance," Caleb announced, his voice thick with emotion as he included his first wife's name in their daughter's. Hannah had suggested the middle name herself, understanding the importance of honoring the woman who had given birth to her sons. It was one of the countless reasons Caleb's love for her deepened with each passing day. As summer ripened into another autumn, the Vance family found its new equilibrium. Grace proved to be a sunny-natured baby, captivating her brothers with her smiles and grabbing fingers. Samuel appointed himself her official protector, while Thomas kept her entertained with songs and stories. On the 1-year anniversary of their wedding, Caleb surprised Hannah with a picnic by the creek. While Grace napped on a blanket in the dappled shade, they sat side by side, watching the boys skip stones across the water. "It's been quite a year," Caleb reflected, his arm around Hannah's shoulders. She leaned against him, content. "Indeed it has. From widow and widower to a family of 5. Any regrets?" he asked, searching her face. Hannah's answer was a kiss that conveyed everything words could not: her love, her commitment, her absolute certainty in the life they had built together. Later that evening, after the children were asleep, they stood on the porch under a canopy of stars, just as they had on so many evenings since that first one when Hannah arrived with soup and salvation. "I've been thinking," Caleb said, breaking the comfortable silence. "A dangerous pastime," Hannah teased gently. He smiled, drawing her closer. "I've been thinking about expanding the house. The boys will need their own room soon, and Grace will too eventually. Perhaps add a proper dining room as well, for all those Sunday dinners you like to host." Hannah's eyes brightened at the prospect. "That would be wonderful. This place has been feeling a bit snug lately. I thought we might start the work next spring after the planting." Caleb hesitated, then added casually, "By then, we might have an even better idea of how much space we'll need." Hannah looked at him sharply. "Caleb Vance, what exactly are you suggesting?" His innocent expression didn't fool her for a moment. Only that Grace might appreciate a brother or sister closer to her age than Samuel and Thomas, for companionship. "Is that so?" Hannah's lips twitched with amusement. "And this has nothing to do with how much you enjoy the process of creating such companionship," Caleb laughed, pulling her into an embrace. "That's merely a fortunate side benefit." As they stood together in the gathering darkness, the ranch house glowing with lamplight behind them and their children sleeping peacefully inside, Caleb reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. From the depths of grief and hunger to the heights of love and abundance, their path had been unexpected but perfect in its own way. "I love you, Hannah Vance," he murmured against her hair. "Every day, I thank God for sending you up that road with your pot of soup and your quiet strength." Hannah turned in his arms, reaching up to trace the lines of his face with gentle fingers. "And I thank him for giving me the courage to take that first step, for leading me to you and the boys, for the gift of this second chance at happiness." Their kiss beneath the vast, Montana sky sealed a promise that had begun on a desperate evening, and would continue through all the seasons of their lives together, through harvests and plantings, through winters and summers, through the joys and challenges of raising their blended family in the wild beauty of white pine. And in the years that followed, as their family grew and the ranch prospered, the story of the starving cowboy's sons and the widow who arrived at dusk became a favorite family tale, told and retold to each new generation, a testament to the healing power of love and the strength that comes from facing life's harshest challenges together.